I think I just want to do a quick few shout outs. Shout out to Malaya, Sunway, and Unimas. Then I want to shout out my teammates who've been really supportive throughout this entire journey. And also lastly, shout out to Taqi. I think the primary question to ask is that do movements exist because of a leader, or can it exist independently without one? Insofar as we tell you that without a leader, movements can still exist, movements can still be sustainable, movement can still be effective, we will speak. We think that leaderless movements looks like movement without a leader, without a specific structure, without a specific hierarchy. This looks like the feminist movement, this looks like the umbrella movement, this also looks like the Black Lives Matter movement. This means that members of that particular movement, the supporters, attach themselves towards the leader and not towards the particular cause. Insofar as we tell you that social causes of the particular movements can still exist without a leader, we think that we need to pay. And this is true because these movements can still exist independently without a leader. Because if it was true that there must be a leader for their social cause to continue, this means that movements like the Black Lives Matter or any movement that fights for the African rights movement will then die right after MLK dies. This means that number two, onto the argument as to why movements with leaders are bad. So before I move on, Shah, to take off your eye.
The burden of scum is not just so that social movements exist without leaders, but the existence of leaders is more harm than good. Why?
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna talk about that. On the argument of why movements with leaders are something that's bad. We think number one is because leaders are valuable beings. They are humans just like you and me, in which they are imperfect, they can make mistakes, and sometimes they can even be problematic by some people. But we say that we be charitable. Even if to the best case that are benevolent, they still mistakes like you and me at the end of the day. But we think that this is something that's problematic when leaders are someone who are fallible, because you represent yourself as the pinnacle of the idea of a movement. In order for your movement to be something that is represented as something that's good, especially you don't want to be used as political ammunition by the opposition, you need to present yourself as perfect as you can. This means that there's a very high burden that these leaders need to carry themselves, the point in which they represent themselves as icons, represent themselves as pinnacles of this movement. This means that there's a very high likely chance that movements with leaders are going to fail. How it looks like when they're going to fail, it means that there's a huge ammunition for opposition to now do things like character assassination. I'll take one later. To do things like character assassination, to the point in which that these leaders are imperfect, these leaders are making mistakes. A lot of the mistakes are then going to be amplified and used that to attack the movement itself, because now you have a leader that associates itself with the movement. This also looks like how it affects the members that support the movement, because the point in which that the leaders make mistakes, we think this means they're going to cause a lot of disagreements within the members themselves. This is going to cause a split, fractionalization within the members. This looks like a split within within the civil rights movement last time, like people disagreeing with the ideologies of Malcolm X and also MLK. This means that the point in which you attach yourself to the leader is in a fractionalization likely going to occur, as opposed to the unionization and the solidarity that happened when you attach yourself to it. Next, because of the fact that smear campaigns are going to happen on both sides, we think that the point in which smear campaigns happen, the harms of character assassination and how it trickles down towards the perception of the movement in itself exacerbate. And this is true because people are rational enough to try to differentiate the difference between what a leader does and what the movement is fighting for. We think that people who are on the fence or people who have no access to whatever information these are things are still going to have these leaders as their first main point of contact when they want to find out what this movement is about. Notice that this means that the fallibility of the leader is going to be something that's incredibly powerful, just even if in the instance where they only make one small mistake can cause a huge detriment impact towards your movement. And this is also true because of the fact that there's an association of movement with a leader. Note that the color of the leader paints the movement. The point in which we tell you that these smear campaigns are going to be effective, and note that this impact also stands in isolation of whether smear campaigns exist. Because whether or not smear campaigns exist, people will still associate the movement with the leader, meaning perceptions like narratives like if the leader is like this, then the supporter is also like that. If the
Hello, hello. This on? I can't tell. Okay, smart. Okay, sorry. Hi, Evan. Just shout out. Thank you, Ming and Raymond. You guys are good. Love you all. Yeah, Sunway, ex Sunway, love all of you all also. Okay. Okay, sign my speech in 3, 2, 1. I just want to point out that the first minute of Ernstie's speech was just being incredibly soft with their burden, which is why there was an unnecessary PY that needed to be wasted anyway. Because if they want to just argue that social movements can exist without a leader, good job, they. If we can just prove to you as to why it's better with a leader, we win the debate. I don't know why you want to take such a soft burden, but even if it can just exist without the leader, I'm unsure as to why that's a burden people want to defend anyway. Few things in my speech. The first idea of just responses directly and then framing and substantive. First, this idea of how leaders are fallible beings. One is that I'm unsure as to why this is such a big problem. The more human you are, the more easier it is for you to relate to other people on the ground. People see you as infallible and people see you as human. People are able to relate to you, and that causes more buy-in, that causes more support for your movement. Two is that they say that leaders are likely to fail because any small problem that they do, they get amplified and that causes ammunition. I just want to point out that even if their argument is true, and even if the people on the ground go and rally, if you're going to perpetuate negative stereotypes based on those individuals who want to fight for those people, and if you're going to say that individuals that make problems are going to force individuals are going to force politicians to immunize it against them, those problems will still exist under their side. Because if they want to talk about the umbrella protest, that how people can go on the ground and protest, they all got shot down because of the fact that you're seen as violent and you want to crack down on these things. So if you have a leader that can go to political processes where it's a lot more respectable and peaceful, those things are less likely to happen. So yes, those things can happen under both sides, but if we can prove why it's better under our side, it's clear that we still win. Two, it's the idea of how people can come together, unionize and protest, then politicians come down to the people. Like, what even is this argument? If it's going to be harder for you to crack down, it's just going to be harder for you to crack down if people are just going to rally on the ground in order to stop it. I'm unsure as to why that is the only mechanism as to how you can make any form of change when you can prove to you as to how leaders can make those changes later. Framing then, one is this idea of leaders. You're oftentimes going to be looked at as role models. This doesn't have to be a singular person, it can be multiple people for a specific movement. You can still leave and you can still get voted out if there's scrutiny, and that causes some form of accountability. Because of the fact you're seen as role models, because your fact you're seen as relatable, you have oftentimes gone through the struggles and have the forms of relatability. Other people are placed and labeled, so because of the fact you have struggles and relatability, example of this like Malaya and Greta, who does it for the environmental movement. Whether it's because of popular, whether because of status, they best represent the movement, and those are individuals that we're willing to defend under our world. Two is that you oftentimes, because of your status and because of the fact you've managed to garner that attention and garner that form of coverage for you, you increase the capacity for you to have some form of representation in parliament, some form of representation in terms of political power, because you're invited to go talk on news shows like CNN and BBC. You can pool funding a lot easier for your social movement, and you spearhead progress a lot easier when you do have a political leader. Third is that not only do you have a leader in your movement, you have other advisory bodies around you. There's a more centralized decision-making system because these are things that you're hearing the voices of people. Those are things that will happen when you have a leader as opposed to when it's leaderless. So it creates more factions under their side because they have no one to scrutinize and they have no one to voice out their opinions to. So you don't have any form of compromise of values, compromise of initiatives that you want to take in order to benefit you because you don't have any form of decision-making process that exists under their world. Why then is it best represent? Why then does a leader best represent the social movement? One is that because of the fact that their pathway is going to be one that's being the catalyst and being that support. They are going to be that emotional catalyst and invoke that emotions in individuals on the ground to make them more spiked up and sparking that idea of wanting to fight in the first place. Social movements stem from historical oppressions in the first place because of the fact they collectively believe in all these things. These are easier when there's someone to invoke those emotions. The leader goes against this and allows that spark to happen there. Being that battering ram and being the person that stepped up in order to go against this oppression is one that's important because absent of that, no one is going to make that decision. So even if you're going to make violent, dumb decisions like going against the state and rallying to the point where you get shot down, and that's the biggest benefit you can get. They willingly put themselves into power because they believe that they want to fight for these causes, and that's why leaders, even if they are seen as infallible, they are less likely to make as many mistakes as what they want to call out because they truly believe in the causes and they are the best representation for that community and movement. Two is that because of the fact of their being that representative for your movement, it's easier for you to lobby for policies and easier for you to form connections. That increases access to media and politicians, and it's also because of the fact that oftentimes the characteristics of your leaders are people who are charismatic and able to attract your allies. They are willing to go to you and are able to invoke those emotions for you. They aren't just your rich white people. They are people who have fought for your problems and fought the oppressions for the like past however many years. Lastly, then the idea of becoming your beacon of hope. Because of the fact you get disillusioned because of the benefit is something that's seen so far in the future and something that you cannot actually visualize happening to you immediately. Those are things that you require a leader for, because you can look to that person in order to see that there's some form of change that can happen in the future. That is something that's beneficial. You know what you're fighting for. Someone can like empathize with you, and you can empathize with that leader for being able to fight for the future and being able to spearhead that movement. Malala getting shot in the head was horrible, but the fact that that is something that sparks and invokes your emotions in order for you to believe in that movement and believe in fighting for that oppression is something that's far more important. The impact of this argument is that it aims to end structural issues, and because of the fact it needs sustainability, those are things that you need more supporters to believe in over time, and that's something that's beneficial. But before the second argument, sure.
People can relate to movements as well. Why does it have to always have space?
Just easier for you to have someone you can relate to when that is the person that's giving speeches. That is the person talking about the oppression that you're going through. That is the person who has a lot more equipped and have a lot more capacity in order to best represent and best like show what are the struggles that you go through. It's a lot easier to relate to that compared to some dumb person that's just standing up here talking. The second thing is that because you are able to trailblaze and set precedents, because everyone can access the social movements and be a part of it, that sets a precedent of how good they can be. The Arab Spring was such a large movement that was started because of large social unrest, but after that there was no one to pass that torch to. The leader part of the movement empathizes with individuals on the ground. You can relate to more individuals there. Someone else can still come in because those leaders were painted towards the leaders are painted based on how the movements are and not the other way around. So if your leaders are shit, they're not going to just say that your entire movement is dog, because that doesn't even make sense. Because you're going to be one that's best representing your movement. I think it's unfair for them to just claim that. Lastly, then is how you best utilize social movement currency. Because of the framing here is because of the fact that social movements are oftentimes multifaceted and have finite capital. You can argue for things like police reforms, and you can also argue for things like defunding the police. All of those are valid, and they all believe that they're fighting for the correct cause. That leads to a more structured movement under your world, because you can't scrutinize an entire movement, create divisions and factions within your movement. This is different under our world because you have a more systematic process and you can actually scrutinize the leader for not encompassing all the views and policies that individuals on the ground want to fight for. That decision-making body is really, really important because it allows more compromise between individuals on the ground. A decision-making body and a leader allows that to happen just easier. And lastly, then the idea of how it creates unique importance. Human being compassionate and being fallible, like what Aisyah says, is correct. That causes you to be able to tie to your leader closely. That causes more relatability between individuals on the ground. You are not going to know the movement rep from like Cebu, and you need someone that actually is the political figure that you can relate to. For all those reasons, very proud to propose.
All right, cool. All right, now moving on to the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case from the government bench. Here.
Wesley.
I'm now suddenly from Belle to give shoutouts, so Malaya, Unimas, Mara, Sunway, X. Everybody else? If they are correct, and the frame intuits that voters doing more harm than good, they fail their way. Because so far, they can't just prove truth, they have to prove exclusivity to at the point at which they do get leader influence. I think Tanish has fundamentally done. Because if they're unable to prove why relatability, buy-in with policies on any of these matters are fundamentally only able to occur when the movement has a leader, or why they are marginally or substantially better than the point at which leaders exist within this movement, they have failed. Because not a lot majority of what Tanish says is inexclusive, and it's already proved to you in Aisyah's speech. But these are things that movements do in a default sense. So therefore, they have to prove one in addition to it, this somehow increases the number of them. The only thing that I can possibly gain from financial speed is the argument about better policies. I'll deal with that now. Four extraneous is auxiliary responses, and then we go on. Number one, I'm unclear as to why relatability is a metric insofar as like causes aren't monoliths, movements aren't monoliths. Why then is a single leader meant to be the pinnacle and of representation and relatability? Insofar as it's untrue that a leader necessarily for a movement is someone that is intersectional and representative of everyone else, because it's impossible. You can't have a perfect individual who's both white and black and straight in order to lead your movement. This is a like physical impossibility. Insofar as that is true, I'm unclear why representation is something that's innately important. Insofar as the fact that you can relate to the cause in which you're fighting. I'm unclear why the feminist movement has to relate to a specific person when they can relate to the struggles of all females that are fighting, of all females that are going through. I'm unclear why relatability is. Secondly, they argue that the structure and the chain, structure and the leadership of a leader is something that's important. Insofar as we're already passing policies that are good, absent of leaders, the fact that Black Lives Matter movement passed defunding police policies, absent of their leaders, means we can come to the conclusion of good policies that can be passed with benefit the movement, absent of it. I mean, everything Tanish is about passing policies, that's probably something that we already do and already come to organically here. But number three, let's do the biggest thing that's come from the side of opposition. We're talking about good policies and how the fact that we will mess around a bit and like do bad things as a whole. And then when a leader occurs, we get good tests. Number one, I'm unclear as to why movements are not able to come with policies as good policies before. My Black Lives Matter movement prove that. And number two, and I learned this thing from Broken, so if I'm wrong, it's wrong, it's not great, right? Movements and as for human society as a self-correcting mechanism means that we self-police ourselves. So if it comes to it and we have to, as a movement, deal with the harms of us making bad decisions, that's fine. Because the outcomes we have better policies based on those bad decisions. We come to better conclusions and better things. If I never make a mistake, or I always hope in order that the thing I'm doing is not mistaken, I'm never going to be fundamentally able to come with quality and policies that are bad. But number four, they argue that therefore there is more accountability and scrutiny. Insofar as these leaders probably elected of the majoritarian group within the community, I'm unclear as to why this scrutiny is something that's going to be beneficial. Why is it that your scrutiny is going to be therefore representative and therefore intersectional? When you don't require the scrutiny because your movement operates as a collective body that is intersectional based on them, when every member is representative of your movement, when your idea isn't shackled to a single being, when everybody on the street is a feminist, every man that picks up plastic on the road is an environmentalist, that is the instance in which you get pure representation and better encompassing of what the idea of the movement really is. Because I'm not clear what the point is burdening a single individual with being the pinnacle and the pure representation of the movement is something that is valuable. Given the multiple levels that NLC says, the fact that character assassination exists, the fact that political ammunition exists, the fact that this is exclusively bad when you do have a leader, is something that is problematic. If you cannot destroy every single feminist on the ground, means you cannot destroy the feminist movement. I'll prove this in the future. There are two issues. First, on fallibility of leaders and the destruction of movements, and secondly, on the inability to kill an idea. So this goes beyond our burden to bring the benefits of leaderless movements and it goes through why it's sustainable. So first, on the fallibility of leaders. So talking about relatability again, therefore, metric. But the fallibility of the leaders means that because the leader is imperfect, yes, you may be able to relate a bit more. But number one, relatability being inexclusive means that the method doesn't really matter. But number two, it doesn't engage our heart that we told you about fallibility. At the point in which an individual makes a mistake is at a point in which not only is it you being problematic, but because you are the representative of a movement in its soul and entirety, there's the point in which, therefore, the movement is culpable of the same mistake that you made. The movement is representative of the kinds of mistakes. Because every mistake you make isn't a mistake by our leader of X movement, it's a mistake that the movement makes as a whole. Why is it problematic? It's because even if it's true that political smearing and smearing campaigns is symmetric on both sides, here's the key difference. The key difference is they have been able to centralize and point political ammunition, which means the smear campaigns is far worse and far more punitive. But yes, then what it looks like is they try, and what this manifests in, it's a very thing that they claim. The fact that the Black Lives Movement already has capital around the deal with these things being shifted away. Because the point in which we have a leader is the point in which you need to shift political capital to defend said leader. It's the very things that enables you to get defunding police policies and defunding mechanisms. It's not going to be shifted to defend your leader. It means you're unlikely to achieve this on scale, you're unlikely to have similar political will to do this. Finally, it's about the perspective or ideas of the movement based on. So even if it's the fact that these leaders aren't necessarily bad or taken political smear campaigns, the fact that they are the first contact means that it can be misconstrued and misrepresented as a movement. It means everyone on the fence is unlikely to buy the movement at the purest point. They're going to buy the mistakes of the leader or the leader represents. We will see why this is not good. Let's see this with great and low emphasis.
There are a variety of solutions to the problem. When problem choice that and continue against each other, how do your social movement react towards the
Dude, I just talked about organic change. We love listening here. Dude, movements are able to grow and change. Based on how the Black Lives Movement isn't as violent as the Black Panther movement back in the 60s. This proves the fact that there's organic ability for movements to learn, to self-police, and to change according to society. You can't say a myriad of things and then how all with this trend analysis to make movements change. Next, your inability to kill an idea. And just deal with the fact that you're instilling representation to a single individual. Not only do you allow for the manipulation of that, it also allows for the distilling of values of the movement. It means that the value of the movement is tied to what this person said, what this person wants. So not only the comparative is more fractalization happens on your side, because even if fractalization is symmetric, what form of fractalization exists on their side is they push individuals in order to be wrong, because there's a definitive correct and wrong answer, which is they have to view with fractalization being individuals dealing with the fact that the leader says are wrong. But it still also diminishes the value of the movement. The fact that the movement can be represented in every single person, the fact that every single individual is representative of the sheer fact that where the movement materializes, where the movement results in, is one in which the movement is focused.
other clients speaker for that final speech. Now moving on to the deputy leader of opposition to continue things from the off bench. Stay here.
Yo, hey guys, oh shit. Stop. That's hey guys. So I'm still doing a shout out to my substantive speaker before my advice. So thank you so much to my teammates, Raymond and Tanish. Genuinely, this has been solely a team effort between the three of us for the past 3 weeks. I'm so fucking proud of what we've done with the past times. 6 fast is crazy now, we're not gonna lie. Thank you so much to Team Malaysia, 2022, 2023. Thank you, my and that, you know, two coaches out and the care for. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Malaysian debate community for making Sunway finals again, going against Malaya. Wow, 2022, crazy, right? Okay, sorry about this. Kanye West said, "What's a mob to a king?" represents an unfortunate reality in society. That going against an oppressive structure requires you not only to have public support, but requires you to have that battering ram. Requires you to have someone who's willingly on the front lines, rallying up soldiers, making sure that everyone's on the same page, ensuring that you do not get disillusioned over a long-term project over 20, 30 years. The unfortunate reality is that government realizes and does not realize that the fact that social movements do not just take 2 years to change. You do not solve racism, you do not solve homophobia. The only way in which you're able to continue this and continuously have substance over the movement is by having a leader. One piece of clarification moving into my two issues. Firstly, on how these leaders get into power, because I think explaining how this individual gets into power in the following ways. And firstly, they are the ones who started the movement itself, who have benevolent interest before it. But secondly, on the idea that these are individuals who probably have popular support, like Maria Shin, like Ambika, when they started and succeeded each other in the birthday movement, meant to say that it also came with a lot of communal engagement, meant with a lot of popular support, meant with a lot of compromises that you were able to get from different factions within the movement. What this means to say, it creates two things. Firstly, it mitigates the malicious intent of leaders to begin with. So if leaders are extremely fallible and just use the movement for their own interest, you do not get them outside of government. But secondly, we point out that if there's an organic shift in the interest of how the movement goes, that you want to shift a perspective of how it is, like reformasi turning from a social movement to a political movement, you're still able to reflect that because you move, your leaders stem from the popular support that you're able to have. And insofar as the leader does not reflect that change, you're still able to have a substitute to that. With that being said, there are actually two issues in my speech. Firstly, on the strategy of how social movements go to, and secondly, in terms of the process of change. Firstly, on the strategy of the social movement. I realized that a lot of analysis that Tanish gave you earlier on speech was just disregarded by Wesley, and I'll read this out again. But let me just give a response from their side. The case on the government is the fact that character assassination is so much easier because now you're hitched entirely to the movement onto one person. I just want to say the framing is first coming in from first speaker's speech. The idea that everyone is a human being and everyone's actions are tied to our own innate human interest means to say that everyone within the movement is fallible. It's why a so leaderless movement does not have a leader being pinpointed. You still have conservative media, you still have people on the left magnifying and examining the looters and rioters that say they represent the BLM movement when it came to the protest. That means to say that you still have large views of negative connotations that you have in the movement. Principally, we do not buy this in debate anyway, because the idea of the social movement is to continuously forward change absent of what you have in terms of character assassination. Their weighing in Wesley also doesn't work. They just say that, oh, because you killed that person's entire interest is tied to the movement, your movement disintegrates. We just say somehow, firstly, if you kill the leader, like literally if they die, you still have abilities to succeed these individuals. That's why Anwar, even though he went to jail for sodomy, Aisyah and Caesar were still able to take over the power and held the reins of the PKR party. That's why they're still able to continue the sustenance of the movement itself. But we like to point out the unique difference that we point out in Tanish's speech on 2 reasons why a leader is specifically important in instances where character assassination is relevant. You see, first on the reclamation of the narrative is that we center our media capital and center the attention onto this leader itself, and we agree with the gov case. Difference is that in the instance when the movement's acting straight away from your own interests on straights, away from the initial popular support, you're able to call out the looters, you're able to call out the rioters, you're able to call out the people who do not represent your movement efficiently on our side because everybody's focus is on you. Secondly, we will find out you set a standard and a precedent for future leaders. The idea that MLK's narrative of peace, Malcolm X's need for armed revolution, the idea is that what you set as a leader right now continues and trickles down to future generations of leaders as well. That's why people say have to meet the standard of Mbika and Mariachi when they fight for anti-corruption policies instead of being complacent. What this means to say that in the future when individuals do become complacent or they stray away from the initial incentives of the movement, that's when we're able to build it up by reinforcing what these founders intended to do so to continuously fight for the cause. But then we do not regard the uniqueness of leaders on our side. The first is on the willingness for you to assume that role. So both sides can have extremely persuasive narratives. The other side can have individuals dying in school shootings or unfortunate tragic events that led to anger of the movement. They don't prove why it's sustainable. We tell you the unfortunate reality is that individuals' attention span goes away with time. You do not have individuals continuously building that up. On our side, the sympathy and the arrows, that's why the arrows still disintegrated at the end on your side. Difference on our side is that when an individual willingly steps up to that position of power, they continuously harness the narrative. Malala was continuously able to use her own experience. Greta Thunberg was continuously able to use her own school time to fight for climate change policies. The idea is that a figurehead of the movement that represents your movement continues the drafting events, continues the remembrance, continues the need for us to fight for that to begin with. That's also why we also tell you, secondly, you are able to continue a movement for the long term. Akasyah's POI to Tanish doesn't work at all. The idea is that social movements are 20, 50-year projects. You do not solve racism and homophobia overnight. It's always a long process where individuals become disillusioned, become disassociated, feel as if there's no substantial change in their lifetime. The only way in which we're able to ensure that people continuously get amped up, continuously get motivated, continuously realize there's a need for change is because a leader is out there telling you that my story is important, that our story is important, I'm a representative of you, the fight should not stop. A human being that you feel compassion for is speaking to you, and only on our side when you've already engaged them prior to the ascension of your leadership, that's why you relate to that person to begin with. I'll take that.
Why is the leader required in order for buy-in to happen? If the movement is proximate to your issues, why is it necessary for an individual to have a face in order to do that?
Yeah, so you buy it right now, I don't guarantee 10 or 1 or 2 years down the line, you're still going to have any change. I might be very passionate about Palestinian politics right now. I might not be in the next 2 years when the situation in Gaza does not get as much media attention. Only when a leader in that movement is able to continuously step up and tell you that there is still a pressing issue in the media is what we are able to gain that media attention on our side behalf. And also the uniqueness of your connection with that leader ensures that you continuously follow in their footsteps or continuously follow in the spirit of that social movement. Lastly, I want to talk to you about change. Realize that Tanish's analysis on change, when entirely disregarded, is the idea that we agree with Wesley's framing. Everyone is a monolith in status quo. And everyone is not a monolith in status quo. Movements have diverse interests. Difference on how we're able to reconcile that. His analysis was to say that, well, you make mistakes right now, so you find out what the policy is. This assumes that people believe that mistakes were made. The framing on our side is that everybody believes that the ideals and the policies that they are fighting for within the BLM movement are all morally righteous, are all morally good. So it's really hard for individuals to reconcile with each other or find a compromise insofar as belief that their principles cannot be encroached upon or contravened. Only on our side, where you actually have someone you are compassionate to or someone you believe in as a leader, centralize the information, centralize everyone's stories, centralize everyone's viewpoints, find a specific policy, sit down everyone on the table like Cebu or Penang or Malacca to actually be able to have a conversation and find a compromise, also to convince that compromise. The process itself requires a central leadership body that everybody feels as if it's representative of that. So sure, you might assume that other people in the movement have goodwill to you. You do not have an incentive to concede to your own principles if you believe that these are individuals who won't concede to theirs. Only on our side will we set a prerequisite to that. And this is specifically important. For the reason being, legislative process is the most important thing that we can talk about. It's the only secure way in which we're able to achieve social change. Only on our side, which the legislative process takes a long period of time. Only on opposition, when we're able to continuously prolong the process and tell you, you should never forget what happened today. You should never forget what happened a few years ago. We're so proud to oppose.
All right, and the entire speaker for that final speech. Now moving on. Now moving on to the government whip, the wrap up the static portion of the government case. Here.
When you fight them. No. Everybody needs shout out to just and body. But shout out to everyone here. Everyone better shout out to debate. Alright. So hard. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. As the only non-Sunway affiliated speaker, merely by virtue of uniqueness, deserve their place. Right? I think I'm immediately going to handle up and two people who a large of their cases dismissive by default equivalence, i.e. the fractalization argument, i.e. a lot of other. That's why two questions that needed answer immediately on all for them to be responsive. Number one, are leaders something that's inherently important for a movement to put forward? They said, no, this debate is about value between is good or bad. But it's also intrinsically about how a value is not represented purely by a face. That you cannot immediately tie in things to things that are fallible, to things that immediately can be taken down as a person. I think this is important. What's the responsibility? And this is crazy, by the way. Let me show you the logical flaw. Their response was that when people see that leaders are human, they will empathize with you. But this is not logically correct. What is this so? Because number one, data so influence. But because number one, the reality of political movements and any social movement is that humans produce political opposition. Self-preferency immediately. They see, unfortunately, this is their logic. Political opposition would look at Greta Thunberg riding a plane and say, one of us guys, rides a plane. I humanize people and empathize that she needs to ride a flight. That's not true. Political opposition says, hey, that's a hypocrite. And this is what environmental movements look like. That every single person or the environmental movement wants are something to take away your rights. I don't know, maybe one more to cost. But this is the reality of how demonization and severity looks like. Their choice to immediately dismiss this case is a downfall of why they don't deserve the ballot. Please be sure.
So the idea is that political opposition is going to sway on both sides, but only on our side where central leadership bodies to rank these things and rethink narrative. How are you going to have that?
It's crazy, that's what you're going. But secondly, right, let's really explain to you that exact reason as to why theory is so effective is because of those central authorities. It's because they're tied to fallible structures. Because the reality of leaders' movement is like what we see in the umbrella movement is by virtue of not having a leader, you can't kill water. You can't kill something that doesn't exist. The reality is when something is free flowing and moving constantly in like a process of equation, you can never kill them.
The reality then is to this brings back to the argumentation about crackdown. No, it's not the crackdown anyway. No case. Because the crackdown of movements is something that is inherently important. Because we want to talk about solvency. It's about how movements maintain themselves to reach towards the point of critical mass. They just say, leaders good. What was the response to this leaders good? This is relatability, guys. You can relate to them. But the QI twice, by the way, from Wesley and Ming. But I can also relate to issues. I can relate to environmentalism without Greta Thunberg being the face that's in front of my eyes. How many of your eyes? Flex. I'll give you one more later. But it's the reality that, for example, I'm able to relate to the plight of the people in Palestine without a face. Notice I'm going to take their logic here. Because their logic was that, if you don't have a face in 2 years, you will forget about Palestine. Isn't that bad? That means when in the establishment of their faces and those faces eventually fade out or don't get in popular ability like what they argue by virtue of multiple different social issues, isn't that exactly why those issues will fade out? The reality of relatability is it comes from your own interest, right? It comes from people wanting to buy into their interest. So it's not an idea of tying into the faith and the reality of how we associate ourselves with movements, but it's also about how to relate necessarily beyond that faith, but the causes that come beyond that faith. They argue that there's an important point of contact. We say this point of contact is problematic. What was the reason as to why this point of contact was problematic? I think this fundamental argument already overused. No response. I want to see more about this. But let's then look at the untraceability when it comes to fractionalization. Because the argumentation of fractionalization was that because there's no leaders, then it will be fractional because people want different things. Well, that's oftentimes the reality of movements at the start of the movement. This is why organic natural change is something that's important. Because movements can also exist to express anger. That's Black Lives Matter. But eventually it became about demands. It became about let's stop police abuse. Let's stop police brutality and defund the police. Multiple different demands. It is a collection and a coagulation of all those ideas which eventually leads to demands. To those demands. So insofar as those demands are something that are able to enter into the political over the window, they cannot say that you are achieve you can't achieve solvency. The reality is that politicians will still react to those demands, and politicians will still have to take into account what like movements want. So you cannot just be dismissed and say the only way you can create change is when you have a leader. I think it's unfortunate coming out from but sure, go.
Do you believe that in 30 years' time, the mass public will still believe that there's a probable solution to the Palestinian cause if you don't think someone is out there spreading the word and continuously forcing individuals?
If Palestine in 30 years is still going to be like screwed over by Israel, obviously people will care. I don't get it. Why does it have to have a face? Like people getting screwed over is an important nature of one's care. I don't need a face to know that people dying is bad. It's good. But anyway, the second thing here, and last thing would be comparative, right? And immediately as to why we do this, I think it is the reality of how an idea is the strongest point. Because notice, we think, and this is my logic, the reason why people want to establish themselves in causes by faith. So if they handsome, I like that cause. Which is fundamentally flawed, which is flimsy, which is the fact that when those people are challenged and scrutinized by a political opposition and people see them as legitimately problematic, they cannot say that some infallible person exists. Maybe they say something like no, right? But the reality is that people are going to make things work with feel. And that means that by association of their face and by their logic, this means that they look at the movements and see why they fail. Allow the movement to not be cracked down and achieve solvency. Insofar as my speech is ended, I don't know. Okay, insofar as my speech is ended, I think there's nothing new coming out from with. Even if it's new, I think they have responded very clear government.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. Let's speak of that by speech. Moving then on to the opposition week to wrap up the substantive portion of the debate. Here.
So a few shout outs to Tanish and Raymond for being such go-to teammates, insane. And also to previous generations of Sunday and DI that without you guys and without the coaching, I wouldn't have been here today giving this speech. So yeah, good. Also shout out our parents. Gauss analysis that this social movement will still exist will be the death of the, because it is true that it will still exist, but it will not exist for long when you don't have a trajectory, when you do not have a sense of direction towards where the movement is going to go in the future. Firstly, on fallibility and mistakes. People can understand that leaders are indeed fallible and can make mistakes. So I don't know why when leaders make mistakes, the movement suddenly falls apart under their side of the house. The first, that this is a centralized body of advisors and guidance to come through the best kinds of decision as well. All appearance feature exactly the incentive structure as to why leaders don't make hasty and rash decisions. And in our worst case, it is a lot easier to rectify those mistakes and to minimize their harms as well. So if Tanish Raymond come through and they don't engage with this, by the way, you still have a board of advisors and a board of departments that is able to advise you on the best kinds of decisions to come to a compromise as well. The second, the comparative is that mistakes are made under their side as well. But it's worse because mistakes compound over time when the movement descends into chaos. This means that even when individuals on the ground make more mistakes, say 100 to 200 grassroots protesters engage in terrorism or violence, such smear campaigns are now amplified as well under their side of the house. Second, this also means that leaders are able to disavow bad apples in the movement and to detach themselves from the movement as well. So smear campaigns are symmetrical. The difference is how do we deal with these campaigns moving forward. We detach away from the worst kinds of these apples. There's that you have to force to deal with people under their side of the house because they are still affiliated with the movement. They say people learn from their mistakes. Dude, that applies to leaders as well. The unique difference here, the perception of mistakes are now magnified more when you see more people making a variety of different mistakes. That means that the movement descends into chaos as well. Now I want to talk about this as well, on unionization and how movements can exist. We consider that movement can exist. The unique difference is that oftentimes there are a variety of solutions to a particular problem that goes against each other. Defunding the police or internal reforms are still both ways to combat against police brutality. Reducing the gender pay gap or disavowing the corporate market or the workplace, for example, are still in line with the feminist ideology. So resources now are more dispersed across, infighting occurs more frequently, and protest happens now without direction as well. Because a lot of these solutions coincide with each other, so you don't know whichever direction you want to actually propel the movement forward as well. The second is the comparative on crackdown. Wasn't the Hong Kong government saying no leaders and think, alamak, no leaders, there is no truth. It is alamak, no leaders, let's shoot all of them. So yes, leaders indeed may die, but the imposition of their values, their ideals, their beliefs and their standards carry on towards successive leaders as well. When one leader dies, it doesn't make sense that you suddenly ignore leaders. You probably do have successors, you probably do have people that you trust within the movement to be able to come up to the position of a leader as well. When they say change, I want to talk about this. They say organic change, but what does that exactly mean under their side of the house is still unclear. And how long do you have to suffer before you get any sort of organic change under their side of the house? They say this term as a magic word to say, we get organic change. When people fight, suddenly you get organic change. Oftentimes it's the opposite. When people fight, the movement shatters into fracturalization, shatters into more infighting between each other. Therefore, you don't get unionization. You get people within the movement fighting each other. But second, even if politicians have an incentive to listen to a variety of, to listen to the demands of the protesters or listen to the demands of social movements. The difference here is that they don't know who to listen to because there's a myriad of different solutions and a myriad of different demands that you cannot see and pick and choose as well. Second, on exclusivity of impact. The first thing that they say is that relatability is a metric. But unfortunately, there is this thing called weighing that Wesley doesn't do. We amplify the kind of relatability under the house. We humanize the cause of environmentalism. We humanize the cause of feminism as well. When people are able to see these things happening on media discussion, when we are able to see these people and see these faces on CNN talking about their own experiences and how it relates and why they fight for the feminist movement. Second, notice their language. Everyone is the movement, which means that when anyone makes mistake, the quantity of mistake makes it unappealing for people to want to join the movements under their side of the house as well. Lastly, then on leaders, before that, Akasyah.
Just like Area 51, Hong Kong cops can't shoot us all. Storm them.
Oh, so this insane DUI under this house, more people die. So if it's true that the Area 51 protest has one leader, you shoot the leader. Under this house, they shoot a lot more people die. I think that's the bad under this house. Ridiculous DUI. Second on leaders, they say that leaders die, movement die, we all die. The problem is that acute analysis that leaderless movements can still exist. That's true. It means that even when leaders die, the movement can still exist. The unique difference is on moving forward, having advisors and partners be part of the transitional figurehead, appointing successors to start leaders. So Tanish's framing on the centralized structure means that the movement won't die, but won't die out. So maybe there's no leaders for the next 3 months. Wesley's analysis of proximity fills in that gap. But the longer you exist without a leader, without a clear direction, without effective decision making, it means that you feel more disillusioned and more apathetic towards the movement. So DK's analysis on proximity is only a temporary plaster to a permanent solution under their house. They say they repeat leaders because they're handsome and they fly planes. I want to just note that this is ridiculous. You want people that are antithetical to your cause. Our framing was here simple. Insofar as leaders are popular across the board, these leaders have also gone through this suffering and have gone through these experiences as well. We don't know as to why these leaders must be heard or must prioritize, for example. These leaders are probably people that are actually devoted to the movement. Nonsense coming from them. The last, that even if it is true that people inside the movement support the idea, the distinction that we made is how people outside the movement perceive the movement. Because on doubt, these movements are seen as being rowdy and violent under their side of the house, which means that you get less buy-in from their side of the house. Because when you do smear campaigns, those smear campaigns need to be on every single problem that happens across the entirety of the movement as well. So if one person makes a mistake or 1,000 people make a mistake, those mistakes are amplified across the board under their side of the house, which means that the perception of the movement is not one that is stable, but rather the one that is a lot worse. In fact, we argue that even if leaders do make mistakes, it is a lot easier to correct for those mistakes because people understand that leaders can also make mistakes but still support them. So the problem with the analysis is that when leaders make mistakes, they assume that these social movements die out. The problem is that it doesn't die out because if it's true that we all understand that humans all make mistakes, sometimes a lot more than others, our analysis proves that A, the frequency of you making mistakes is a lot less because of Tanish's framing, but secondly, we're also able to prove as to why you're able to rectify those mistakes earlier because you disassociate and you detach away from the worst harms and the worst and most extreme part of the movement as well. The last thing to say in this debate is to say that the movement will be sustainable under their side of the house. They gave no analysis for this, and you notice this coming from their speech. They said that you get organic change and you get a lot of these people relate to the movement. That is symmetric. You are also able to have those people relate to the movement under our side of the house. The difference now is that leaders make tougher decisions on what the actual direction to go to, concentrate their resources there, so movements are deemed and perceived to be more effective as well. Under their side of the house, when demands coincide and contradict against each other, it means you have more infighting and resources is dispersed across the movement as opposed to fighting for one singular goal. If you listen to all of their speeches, a lot of their analysis are symmetrical. People join the movement on either side of the house. The difference is how you carry on forward sustainably. Insofar as that we're able to prove that, I think this is Sunway way.
All right, cool. I'm going to speak on that by the speech. Now moving on to the opposition side. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take Sunway to start my speech. But I just want to say I hope we win so next time Raymond can actually have like substitute fire in schedule. But thank you so much, everyone. Really love the debate. Gauss' analysis of you can't kill water in the Hong Kong protests will probably work if we disregard the amounts of rubber and actual bullets that the Chinese government has put on the floor, and the amount of soldiers that barricaded up Hong Kong and made it into a police state. Unfortunately, Gauss can't get away by saying the fact that if you kill one person in Twin Falls, insofar as the government and the presses will still always find a way to kill everyone on the ground. So we're done in this speech. Firstly on the identity, and secondly, again on factualization and change. On the identity, I should want to point out the entirety of Gauss' analysis was still on the idea of character assassination. It's the assumption that opposition leaders and opposition individuals, contrary to your movement, will equate different standards onto a leader and a person that is here on the street. This is crazy because they doodle in your backyard of opposition, and MLK on our side will still be smeared regularly and negatively in the face of the media. They will still be used as cannon fodder. They still will be used as narratives against fighting for the social movement, as the overwhelming opposition narrative is still
able to find a scapegoat and blame everyone for it at the end of the day. So yes, government, we actually did respond to what happens if one person dies. The point is that on our side, if everybody is leaderless in the case, there still exists a greater incentive to track down on everyone, or it becomes easier for you to track down on certain individuals insofar as you know that there's no continuity. So the reform Muslim movement will probably have been gone after Anwar got jailed for sodomy on their side of the debate. Only on our side, when continuation of leadership actually ensures sustainability. But here's the difference that they do not really identify, is that on what roles do we actually set? Here's the two things that then one went unresponded to coming in from governments. Firstly, the reclamation of the narrative itself. You amass the only media attention solely on that leader themselves. You allow them to reclaim that narrative or fish a new type of perspective to claim that we do not represent the movement and legitimacy is exclusive to our side because they are the only figurehead for that movement, so you flip the metric on their side. But secondly, is in terms of what we set as precedent for future leaders, to ensure that the norm of peace or the norm of armed revolution continues down the line, making sure that we are all consistent, allowing for people to believe it. Shakir knows this was in DPM that went unresponded to at the end of the day. But that's not how about the process of change that they do not identify. It's in terms of it requires leaders to be part and parcel of the movement. Sure, everyone has stories that they can tell, and there are always tragic events. Differences on how you relate to it or how much you can empathize with it. We tell you that, sure, people can feel change. Difference that when someone feels disillusioned down the line, that 20 or 30 years of social change just cannot happen by looking at hundreds of thousands of school shootings. You require someone to continuously feed you that story. You continuously require someone who empathizes with you, to remember the fact that they were shot in the head just because they wanted to go to school, to remember they had to go on riots and be shamed in front of the United Nations just because they wanted to fight for climate activism. Those stories stay, those stories sustain themselves, those stories are exclusive, but we tell you it's independent of these tragic events that you always want to have. You only get periodically some increase in the awareness that dies down long term. You do not get strong sustainability. Lastly, I want to do factionalization. I don't think government actually rebuilds their case after we respond to all of them. I think Raymond does a good job on it. The organic change from government is not their human response. The fact is that the movement is still able to adapt and change perceptions. Everyone is not a monolith. Anyone can have different perceptions. It's how we reconcile this. On their side, people still have some factions who are resistant to change. People still believe that their faction is also morally righteous because they are opposing the state itself. Insofar as they do not get reconciliation, but there's no incentive for this force to occur at all, they can't run away saying that if you make mistakes, that's how you change. No, you don't see those as mistakes. You don't make that change to begin with. Only on our side when you believe that central leadership bodies that have connected with you over the rise of their power, that you realize that you have a relationship with them closely, means to say that you have goodwill in that person and in that leadership body, way more than you have with someone that you've never met who claims that they are another part of the movement. That's when even if individuals have similar principles that cannot correlate, like reconcile with each other, on our side, the essential leadership body is able to create concessions, create compromises, ensuring that everyone is heard, or even in the instance where you have to sacrifice, you feel as if the battle is not lost because someone in the upper echelons still listen to you and still willing to fight for you. And this is crucial in the framing that Tanish has already gave you that are unresponded to, is that we cannot afford mistakes. We cannot use our finite resources on the things that we do not know. We cannot have that on side of opposition. To be honest, I don't really buy the government at the end of the debate, because we believe that the only movement that can work without a leader is when a Chinese, an Indian, and a Japanese point to Shah and one thing take away all 7 ballots. We're so proud to host.
Sure, cool. I have a kind of figure out that I teach now to wrap up the debate as a whole, from the idea.
For the guys at the back, I finally found a team more dismissive than Malaya one. That's talking about the multiple issues as why Sunway MRT, just like the MRTs in our country, break down as well. For I better call out this debate than number one, the inability for them to respond to the very frame they came out of Taqi means that they are unable to take this. Because we've questioned down the bench, why is this debate comparable? Insofar as the bulk majority of their responses or their benefits is something that social movements already do in status quo. The ability to self-correct and therefore counter fractionalization. The ability to table policies that are meaningful. the ability to hold the attention of the people on the ground. Insofar as I'm unclear as to why a face is something that is necessary for people's attention span to increase, given that we don't like to look at the same TikTokers multiple times, is the very reason as to why about majority of the material in the speech was uncomparative and exclusive. Given that from NC with OUI necessarily, you have to prove that they are leaders for something that want exclusive benefits, and that all of the benefit analysis is something that already occurs, even if you want to conceive maybe at a slightly less extent. They didn't prove why this was something that was meaningful or magnified on their side. Number two, the unresponsiveness of case infallibility. The only thing to say was dismissive response to say that individuals are related. Guys, it doesn't engage. Take down the fact that fallibility is something that will taint the movement, taint your members, and taint your message. At a point in which you are magnified when you are the sole point of checking, means that even outside and everybody makes mistakes, it is far more greater, far more magnified, and far more put under a spotlight on your side. We've proven to you for NC that an individual leader carrying the burden of a movement, their mistakes are then more magnified, more politically analyzed, and taken down at a point in which it's focused. Number three, the unmechanization of how their impact translates to the movement. I don't even know what these words anymore. But the impact already translated. So look at the fact that the only mechanism they use to prove that they get actual changes that they are first contact point of politics. The rest of it is the bunch of decisions. Somehow they get released. Somehow they get valuable change. It's about they don't do the legwork in order to prove why this occurred. We are better able to prove to you the fallibility of leaders means that you are better able for the worst form of your opponent to crack down on you. The perception of individuals in order to always think that at one which you are never a representative or good member of your community, being something that's valuable or being something that's important in order for movements to change and move on from. Four, they are uncomparative on the issue of regionalization. I think the debate isn't about regionalization or exclusivity where it happens, because both sides have admitted that regionalization occurs. The debate, therefore, is something that we're uncomparative about, is when regionalization happens first. So if we prove by the fact that they do have regionalization, the inability for leaders to follow through and say they are wrong on our side, therefore demonizing and excluding the entire movement. This analysis coming from my analysis means that regionalization occurs far worse on the other side of the house. Because even reconciliation is a demonization and outcasting of an entire section of the movement. It is something we have to deal with. And let me just note, I think we need to bring back the new material and bring it from the event, because if you check the notes, you find the new material there. Right? Two things. Number one, in terms of fallibility, it's uncomparative in just ability, such as blue TY faces necessarily isn't the tipping point or the things that mean that fallibility changes at the point where we see a face, therefore we relate to it, and therefore we all know that mistakes occur. The fact that NC is doing you from the beginning, the mistakes are magnified and immortalized at the point at which you are leaders. While smear campaigns become worse at the point at which you can point to an individual and say, this is the person that messed up, this is what the movement is about. And number three, how even exclusive of this, even if this thing happened, or the fact that the perception of the individual on the ground is tainted by the approach the movement as them being your first contact point. It's something that's imperative, it's something that's important to deal with as a harm, something they haven't dealt with. I think we witnessed that. Secondly, on the fact that they never kill an idea. From LCC people to you, a movement in limbo at one of the leaders destroyed. From RC people to you, the valid individual representation of a movement. From science people to you, the inability to crack down with the flow like water. The meaning of this is comparative. It is a debate about resistance and binding. Which side better allows for the individual, which side better allows for the insulation against the proper crackdowns, when leaders therefore are lightning rod against these crackdowns, where which side better happens. Malaya has not lost against Sunway, the track record proves the game.
Alright, so